Hello everybody. Thanks for coming. And this is the Ending a Podcast panel, where we're going to talk about ending podcasts. My name is Benjamin Jacobs. I am the host of Wittenberg to Westphalia: The Wars of the Reformation, which is not ending, but I thought this would be an interesting topic, and so I'm moderating because this was my idea. So with me today, I've got three fantastic hosts of fantastic shows, past and present, and we're going to talk a little bit about what this whole ending a podcast thing is about, because that, it'll happen to all of us one day.
You think it won't, but then it sneaks up on you.
It's really a question of whether you handle it gracefully or not.
Yes.
Whether you happen to it or it happens to you.
Yes. I have a feeling that I am literally going to die before I get to the end of my podcast. So one way or the other. Okay. But with that, let's just kick this off. How about we all go around and we can introduce ourselves and talk about our shows. I'm not going to talk about my show because that's not really why we're here. But Daniel, kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Daniel Doughty. I have co-created and co-hosted three podcasts now. One is on a kind of indefinite hiatus. That's the Cannonball. We are planning on bringing that one back. I am currently the co-host of the world's preeminent 90s Star Wars novel recap podcast, Thrawnderdome. But of interest to this panel, I was the co-host, original co-host and co-creator of the Lesser Bonapartes history podcast, which started in 2014, almost 10 years ago now, in which I left the show in 2016. But yeah, so really for the purposes of this panel, I'm the former co-host of Lesser Bonapartes more than anything else.
Saying 2014 was 10 years ago sounds so wrong. It feels like
Yeah,
my entire lifetime has passed before my eyes since 2014.
Yeah, for real. It seems like a long time ago, but then I think about like how much life I've had since then, and then it makes sense.
Rob, what about you?
yeah, I'm Rob. I am the co-host and producer of two main podcasts at the moment. Both of them Totalus Rankium. One covers all the Roman emperors. The other covers all the American presidents. And I suppose it's more the Roman one I'm here to talk about, because if you count the knockout rounds at the end, we're roughly on about 200 episodes, and we are 3 to the end. So, yeah, we are about to hit the end of a podcast that we started in 2016, and yeah, it's all about to finish. So there you go.
Benjamin, you're muted.
I'm better than this. I'm Benjamin Ashwell. I co-created the Talking History podcast, the Italian Unification, with my brother Adam. We ran from 2013 through 2016, and then the last 3 episodes dribbled out over the following 3 years, talking about basically the 18th century and 19th century, how Italy went from being about 11 to 13 states, depending on how you define Italy and state, in 1790, to being basically one state, if you squint a little bit, in 1870. How did it go? How did that happen? And yeah, so kind of a niche appeal.
So how did you guys come to the decision to end your shows or leave your shows, or however you want to phrase it?
I can feel that one first, fellas. If
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so when we were kind of getting ready and preparing for the conference, there was the I was asked to fill out like a panelist bio, like a little information for everybody. And I made sure to put in there that I am a hobbyist podcaster, simply because at I've been working a full-time job really the entire time that I've been involved in podcasting and doing podcast projects. And when we began Lesser Bonapartes, the show actually, I think it overlapped about a month with my completing graduate school. I got my master's in library science and then immediately had started Lesser Bonapartes. And of course, my wife made fun of me for saying like, well, it looks like you just gave yourself more grad school. And that was actually not a bad way to put it. We were very dedicated to doing it right when we did the show, or as right as we could as two kind of laymen. So we had a strict, no Wikipedia rule, and we made sure to research to the best of our ability all the topics we were going to be holding forth about. I wanted to give people the best information I could, and that takes a lot of time. I mean, I'm sure you guys, I mean, and
Yep.
and then like it takes a lot of time to do it right. So ultimately, the I was involved in the show for about 2 years flat, and and over the course of that time, it ended up taking more and more time out of my week. Eventually, it really was adding like at least one more work day to my week. Like I ended up, and we were on like a weekly schedule as well, and that that didn't really help. But so ultimately for me, the decision came down to I needed to, it was a matter of prioritizing my time. And I loved doing the show and I loved doing all the research, but it ultimately, like, dedicating that kind of time to it was detrimental to my kind of interpersonal relationships, my not necessarily my professional life. I managed to not get in too much trouble sneaking in some research on work hours, but I could kind of tell like this is a little bit burning the candle at both ends, and that's ultimately what kind of made the decision for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I work 4 days a week now, for that very reason. I'm a teacher, but I was able to drop down to 4 days a week because there was no way I could carry on unless I did something, and I did not want to stop podcasting. And fortunately, when I went into the office and said, I think I might need to quit, they said, what about 4 days? So I was able to carry on. But it's very different with Totalus Rankium because we've got an endpoint as soon as we start. Because we are ranking every emperor and every president. So we start something and we know there's an endpoint to get to. And you just need to keep chipping away at it. And because there are so many of them, you just assume it's never going to actually happen. You've got a podcast that's just going to keep happening because you've got a podcast and it grows and it becomes more popular and you're happy. And then suddenly you go, oh, I've got 10 more emperors left and then it's finished. What on earth do I do now? Which is kind of where we are at the moment. Fortunately, because Totalus Rankium is Totalus Rankium and there are presidents and there are emperors, it means a new one could be started once the Roman Emperor podcast is finished. So although the podcast will end, something else will start, and there is a continuation there, which I'm pleased about because I'm still very happy podcasting away.
So when my brother and I started talking history, we both felt that the kind of story we wanted to tell was one with a beginning, a middle, and end. That I love me some draw a topic out of a hat podcast, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. We wanted something that, again, beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah,
that would help us tell it. So right away built in, there's an endpoint in the podcast name. I mean, we always introduce ourselves talking history, the Italian Unification, 1790 to 1870. So 1870 is the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, so my brother and I were both in grad school when we started getting PhDs in chemistry, and I really needed a creative outlet. Like, grad school was good. I enjoyed it. I'm really glad I did it, but it was kind of lonely. I didn't do a lot of interpersonal stuff, a lot of math, a lot of programming. So I really needed this creative outlet. I'm now gainfully employed at a job I really like, and podcasting is a lot of work. I found like about 20 hours of work for 1 hour of podcast ish, something like that. So you combine the forcing function of, hey, we're running out of story to tell because we're hitting the end, and I'm not a grad student anymore. It felt about the right time to put it to bed.
Yeah. Oh, did we lose Benjamin?
We lost video.
There we go. Okay, cool.
Feline problems.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm dealing with a little of that myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all three of you are ending your show under very different, or ended your shows under very different circumstances. So that's kind of, it's like someone planned that.
Who'd have thought?
But what was it? What's the sort of experience like, if you don't mind saying?
It's
and yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I bizarrely emotional is what I was going to say. You poured so much time and effort into something, and then realizing it's going to end is really strange. It's a very strange. Even really small things like you're editing the podcast and you realize, well, probably the last time I'm going to use this music clip whilst I'm editing. Yeah, I'll do other podcasts. Yeah, I'll do other things. But this little sound clip that I recorded 7 years ago and I've been using ever since, it's now going to end. And just small little things like that, which you say them out loud, and it doesn't seem like a big deal at all, but it is emotional.
Yeah.
More so than I would have expected going in. Feels like an end of an era.
Yeah, for me, I'd say it was a relief, not in the sense of like I made it. As people who've listened to our show know, the release schedule was good, and then pretty good, and then all right, and then terrible. And just feeling, I've made it over that hump, because you get in this guilt loop of I should be working on this, and I feel bad for not working about it, so I'm going to repress those, and just realizing like I did what I said I was going to do. We said we'd tell this entire story, and we did. And so just thank goodness, and thank goodness for my wife for helping to go to the grocery store and stuff to make time for me to work on it. Yeah, so it was. I felt a little sad, but mostly just the relief of we made it.
Yep.
I'll just slip in here that in terms of the work going into a podcast, there's a reason that I have a monthly or worse release schedule, because I don't have any of those supports.
Yeah. Speaking to kind of it being more emotional than you expected, so I think for my circumstance, it was a little different in that I actually didn't end the show. I'm kind of snuck on this panel, but by the time that I had left the show, we had actually built a kind of little family that was making it. It was me and Glenn Gibbs to begin with, and we brought on Andrew Van Kuka to do some editing work for us, and a little bit of as a research aid as well.
Who's now my editor and a PhD student in Luxembourg, of all places.
Yeah, exactly. Andrew's gone off to great things in the field of history. I feel proud to have launched that for him. That's really but I'm no hero. But we had other collaborators like Anna Laura Weinberg, and so by the time I concluded that I needed to leave the show for my own kind of personal reasons, we had enough kind of people involved that we organized a Goodbye Daniel episode, and it was I was not prepared for just how fun and funny it was, and just to have a kind of moment to like look back on my contributions to the show as it would go on forward for a while, with some amazing new hosts being brought in, like Bree. Actually, everybody at this conference knows Bree. She contributed to Lesser Bonapartes after I had left. Christoph Andresons, and some other folks. If I'm forgetting anybody, I'm very sorry. So it was almost like it was a combination of feeling like kind of like graduating, but also like waving goodbye to your kid on the school bus. It was a very strange kind of emotional landscape that I felt. Bittersweet is kind of a cliche to say it, but just given my circumstance, I knew it was the right decision to make for me personally. But it was also kind of sad to say goodbye to a little, a little bundle of traditions that we built up together.
How is this is going to again apply to the three of you very differently, and then after this we'll go to the Q&A. But how has this affected your life subsequently after moving on?
I think that I do quite a bit of public speaking in my job, and between podcasting and debate in high school and college, I now know how I talk.
Yep.
So I can write scripts for myself. I can write slides because I know where I'm going to pause. I'll put the comma in the sentence where it doesn't belong grammatically, because I'll know I'll pause there rhetorically. So kind of this self-learning. I got how I talk, how I organize things, and just being comfortable with the mountain of text, the mountain of ideas, trying to figure out, okay, quick, how do I find a theme? What are the things I want the audience to remember? It's an 8,000 word episode. People are going to remember like 2 things. What do they need to be? How do I string that through? Or how do you organize your thoughts and your speech? You tell them what you're going to tell them. You tell them what you told them. Just that experience I probably did 40 of the 50 episodes for, 40, 45-minute episodes, just learning about how your mouth wants to talk. I'd say that's been a direct impact.
And that's certainly the case for me as well, which became very evident today, because I'm not at home and I'm stuck in another country at the moment, and I did not think I was going to be able to make it today. So I emailed Jamie my notes, and the plan was he'd deliver them. And I emailed my notes in a kind of, I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to read these. These are my notes. They're personal for me. No one's meant to ever see these things. But yeah, you learn a lot about how you speak, how you perform, how you articulate things, just through listening to yourself speak for hours and hours and hours. Not many people do that. It's a very strange experience in many ways.
I'll throw in briefly. You also, I think, to some extent, get over most people's own revulsion at hearing themselves on tape.
My inside voice is now the same as my outside voice. It sounds exactly the same. It merges.
Especially if I'm speaking calmly, not stuttering, maybe I'm scripted. My own voice doesn't bother me the way it used to. So that's a plus.
That is one thing that I've gotten. I didn't do the editing on Lesser Bonapartes, but I do on Thrawnderdome, the show that I do now. And one thing that's a little jarring is when you can recognize the waveform for when you say
Yeah. I don't even, I cut them out without even listening now. It's like, well, that was me saying
I know you, so there you go. But no, I think that's very like Benjamin was saying. You get to, to crib from Socrates a little bit. You have the examined voice by the time you're into this, all that much. And so I've actually kind of I know for a fact that the kind of skills and self-knowledge that I gained doing Lesser Bonapartes, being involved in podcasting, I got bit by the bug. So one of the things that I learned was what I can actually accomplish, what I can actually commit to, because that's one thing that I felt very bad about. And one of the reasons I had to leave is that I was overcommitted. Like I was not able to, I knew that I had to kind of come to a stopping point before I got to the point where I was not able to deliver a product that was up to snuff for me. Like something that I would listen to, something that I felt proud enough to do. And that's one of the reasons why kind of my last hurrah on the show was the topic that I had wanted to do the most, which was Islamic Spain. So we were able to do our last series that I was involved in ended up being 7-8 parts. So, you know, a good solid, 12 to 13 hour audiobook on the topic of Muslim society in the Iberian Peninsula. And I was able to go out on that last hurrah, having a lot of knowledge about, the kind of load I could take on, what I would be able to do. And so in my subsequent podcast projects, like the Cannonball, for anyone who's not familiar, that's one I do with my co-host Claude Myron Guzer, who is an actual scholar of literature. He is an actual professor. Yeah, I am merely a autodidact dunce. But the project is to go through and read the books in Harold Bloom's The Western Canon, kind of engage with the idea of a canon to begin with, but more importantly, to kind of record our personal responses to these books, the great Western literature or whatever. One thing you learn is that they're all much weirder than you would expect. They are not musty old tomes in the slightest. But that was what I kind of learned from Lesser Bonapartes. The release schedule on that was about monthly, and I knew that was I would be able to do the kind of quality that I wanted to there. The current show that I'm doing, Thrawnderdome, the material is not nearly as demanding, so I actually can do it because we're just reading dumb Star Wars novels and just kind of recapping them and yakking about it. So that was when our release schedule does tend toward weekly. I've gotten a little bad about that, but it's been interesting that having a better idea of like what kind of energy I can commit to a project, and that has actually had an effect in my professional life as well. Like I have a much better idea of where I can say I can pitch in, I can do this, I can meet these benchmarks, and when I can say I'm not the guy for this, I'm not going to be able to help out with this, but good luck. And that's been very helpful. And I think in just about every aspect of my life, I learned my lesson.
So I'm going to move us over to the Q&A portion. So Rick asked, do you think the community and fans make it harder? Thinking of Totalus Rankium and the emergence of Jeff, the connection there must be hard to stop.
I take it by harder as an ending. Does it make ending the podcast harder? Yeah, definitely. So the best thing about doing the podcast was the fact that I had an excuse to talk to Jamie at least once a week, probably more, and we just get to mess about. And just having an excuse to talk to your friend rather than like just arranging it, that was the best thing. What I was not looking for was a community to build up that like care about what you're doing and want things to continue. I mean, it's brilliant. I love it, but it wasn't something I was expecting to happen. So I certainly didn't think about it at the start, whereas now we are coming to the end of one of the podcasts. And I think having that community and knowing what that community would like you to do does add a certain pressure, especially because we are ending one podcast, but we will be starting another one. And I know some people want us to go one direction and some people want us to go another direction. And that is tricky because you don't want to upset anyone who enjoys your podcast. So yeah, that does make it harder. But equally, I'm fairly sure our community of listeners are just really nice people and will be supportive of whatever we do. And so, yeah.
It did mean kind of one extra wrinkle with Lesser Bonapartes in that we had a Patreon going at the time, which was actually doing fairly well. Is my co-host Glenn really wanted to double down and really lean into that, and this was around the time that I knew that he was looking to he saw this as a way to be a job, and that's another reason why I knew I needed out, because I have a job and I'm not I can't make podcasting my job. So that the sense of the community, we had built up a kind of customer base really, and so that was a little complicated when I left. Is just kind of well, how do we divvy up the Patreon stuff, because we had been just kind of investing it all in the show more than anything else. It wasn't like we were taking payouts and that was our mad money or whatever. So that was actually, it was almost like a divorce settlement. So it was kind of, not necessarily awkward conversations, because we, for me and Glenn, we ended up just like, okay, whatever the current, pot is in there, we'll split it in half, and then there we go. But definitely wasn't something I was anticipating when I started the project.
For me, it was, and I think by the nature of the podcast having an end date in its title, the community made it easier, because it was people. Well, two things. One, people wanted to get to the end, to tell them how it ended. We promised to 1870, so get to 1870, damn it. So that pressure helped motivate it. I started the podcast for me, but by the end, I didn't need it, emotionally anymore. But I wanted to finish it for the people who had supported us. So that I still occasionally do get emails from people saying, "Have you done another podcast? Are you gonna do another one?" And I said, not anytime soon, most likely. But yeah, the community helped to give me the motivation to say, I want to finish it, because there are people out there who want to know what we think.
Yeah. See if there's other questions. One thing that's interesting at this point for me, and if anyone else has questions, please put them in the chat. But while I wait for some others, the place that podcasting has reached in modern culture, where I met a new coworker recently, and I said, yes, as a middle-aged white man, I do have a podcast. So how's that conversation for you guys? Because it's like, as a middle-aged white man, I did have a podcast.
I have had this this conversation before. It's interesting, because when I first started in 2016, everyone was saying, well, it's over. No one's starting podcasts anymore. There's no point starting. And I remember hearing someone say when I started exactly what I've just said now. So I think anyone who wants to start a podcast could just discount that idea, definitely. But I have definitely had conversations with people where I have gone, yes, I've got a podcast. And then I have to immediately go, but actually it's a real podcast, honest. It's a real podcast. People listen. We're on charts and stuff. Honestly, we're not. It's glazed over. You already don't care. But then you meet some people who do care, and they listen and they're interested. And it's like, yeah, there are a lot of people with a lot of podcasts, but there are a lot of people who do a lot of things. And if people stick with podcasting, and you've got a good idea and you're putting out a good show, people will keep listening. And yeah,
the moment I say it's about 19th century Italian history, they go, okay, they're nerds. Okay, so it's probably safe. They're not dangerous. Just don't make any sudden motions. I have had at least only a handful, but a few times where I have met people, so somebody, my very close friends' mothers, was a listener to our podcast and didn't know that the connection kind of thing, and she's saying to her daughter, "Oh, I'm listening to this podcast about Italian history. You mean Benjamin's podcast?" Yes, Benjamin Ashwell. You know Benjamin Ashwell. He went to school with me. Oh.
Have you met anyone in real life, like face to face, who has got to know you through the podcast, but you've never met them before? Because that's happened to me a few times, and it's really strange, because it really feels like they've got an advantage on you. It's like, you've heard me talk for hours and hours. You know a lot about me, and I don't know anything about you.
I have not had that pleasure, sadly.
I've had one or two. One specifically that I can think of.
It's when you're meeting the parents of a new partner who have been listening to your podcast. That's interesting.
Yeah. Thinking of some of the anecdotes I've told on my podcasts, I would likely be mortified if that ever happened.
Well, fortunately, me and Jamie mainly stick to the history, so it's It's fine. But I did have a mental kind of, I wonder exactly what episodes they listen to. And yeah.
So did anyone here find new professional opportunities because of their podcast, and that's why they decided to move on?
No, there was I described our podcast to somebody as like a real champion in the featherweight category of like among very niche podcasts. We did, I think, I'm really proud of how we did. Like in that small category, the bespoke artisanal, we had I think a really good following. But we're talking about an itty bitty slice, and yeah, I never got the call from the agent saying, I love your podcast, I want you to write a book.
Yeah.
No, it hasn't happened to me either. It's a shame.
And that is what I think what's most valuable about podcasting as a format is that it can be so niche. And that like when Lesser Bonapartes started out, I got to know Glenn via some kind of groups dedicated to I don't know if we have any fans of the Flophouse podcast.
Yes.
One of the great bad movie podcasts of
I
all
saw
time.
them live.
Oh, awesome. And that's how I got to know Glenn. Like we were both involved in a group dedicated to that podcast, and we got to talking. We were both interested in history, and so the initial concept for our show was, hey, what if we give history the Flophouse treatment? Just kind of have a more or less freewheeling conversation about these historical topics, and we give ourselves permission to kind of riff on it or go off on bits, and we did. But that's also a very like, well, how many people are out there who really want to listen to history with some funny bits thrown in, but there was actually a healthy response to it. I mean, that's it did touch a nerve, and that was really cool. But it wasn't the kind of thing. I mean, like you said, Benjamin, it wasn't like then we got the call from A&E,
the movie deal, yeah.
Put you on History Channel, but nothing like that. For professional opportunities, I haven't done any. There aren't any professional opportunities. Never got called up to the majors. But my podcasting experience does help me in my job as a librarian. I do a lot of social media stuff for my library, and so that I've actually started doing a few like kind of 5-minute history clip topic kind of videos for my library. And so, like, if nothing else, I've been able to utilize some of my podcast experience in a professional capacity. But that's the best I can say for it.
Yeah, on the one hand, most people can't say that they have an audience of literally thousands. But then in the grand scheme of the, 8 billion people in the world right now?
It's both a very large and a very small number.
Yeah.
Compared to what?
Yeah.
So to think of like, with a couple thousand listeners, like you're filling out the biggest concert venue in your town.
Oh yeah.
That's not like an amphitheater or something. And that's not bad,
Something I will certainly miss if it stops is very selfishly, I now have a place I can go on the internet and get instant feedback on stuff. It doesn't even need to be podcast related. I can just go onto our Discord and just say, I don't know, it's anyone in this part of the country, does anyone know a good thing about this? And there will be instantly people chatting to me, which I need to remind myself sometimes. It's like, no, people don't usually have this. This is a nice little privilege and a perk that I've managed to get through podcasting, is instant feedback from real people on the internet, which is nice.
Your Discord is apparently, I'm not a member, but it's got a reputation of being completely ridiculous.
I'm not a big Discord user. I only go on to occasionally go on my own Discord. And so I don't know what it's like to other places, but I did spend it was a very, I won't go into it, but not a great fun time of my life not long ago. But I was able to entertain myself by just messing with everyone in the Discord by changing all their settings and things, because I've obviously got a hidden god complex that I didn't know I had, and I just like messing with people, apparently.
Podcasting is therapeutic.
Yeah, definitely.
Jenny says, my tattoo artist told me she listened to my podcast as she was doing my tattoo.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
The closest I've got to that is I got a letter through my door, very boring tax letters to do with the podcast, but scrawled on the envelope in handwriting from the postman was, "I listen to your podcast. It's amazing." So, wow.
That's cool.
That's nice. The postman listens to my podcast. Yeah, that was a nice moment.
Yeah, the best I've gotten, I haven't had anything like that, but I was pretty chuffed to hear my a coworker started listening to Thrawnderdome and really enjoyed it. And he was telling me that he started having dreams about me because he would be listening as he goes to sleep. So I was a little, he's a good dude. We've known each other for many years. So it was very funny, but I just can't imagine myself invading someone's dream space like that.
Oh, well, it's crazy, isn't it? Because I've definitely listened to podcasts where I've listened so much, I start dreaming in that voice. And that means there are people out there who have dreams in my voice. And I'm so sorry.
Christine said, "My boss told me that she listens to her show in her office, and she admitted it because she was afraid I'd walk in and hear it and be surprised." Well, last call for questions. And anyone have any final thoughts about all this?
If you're thinking of doing a podcast, you can do it. You can do it. Just understand the time commitment that you're signing up for to make a product that you want. If you've got the time or can make the time, you can make a podcast, and people will listen to it, and they will write you nice emails saying how much they enjoy it.
Yeah.
The ratio of like thumbs up email to hate mail, in my experience, is pretty steep. Like if 100 to 1.
Yeah.
Not that I have that many of either, but I've gotten vanishingly few "you sucks" and a lot of "hey, I like your podcast."
People are generally nice.
Yeah.
Especially ones who listen to niche podcasts. They're generally nice people.
It goes a long way toward it, because it's like, for a lot of this, it's just like, well, you as a listener, you gotta seek this out.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of just like you flip on the TV and whatever's on broadcast, whatever. Like, you took the steps to listen. So I always feel like it's a bit, anytime, like, I mean, like you said, Ben, like, there's the ratio of negative feedback to positive is vanishingly tiny. But when you do get that negative feedback, I was going, well, you went out of your way to come see me.
Yeah.
And start talking about Grand Admiral Thrawn to you. You thought this out and you listen. I even put a disclaimer at the beginning of the show to say, if you really are like in the tank for Star Wars, you probably won't like the jokes that we're going to make at the expense of this work. Like I did all of my part. So, cool your jets, buddy.
Yeah. I can't even explain to people what my show is at this point. All right. So that's our time. Thanks, you guys. This was a great chat. And thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
And catch you all around.
Great.
Right.
Cheers.